Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today I have the pleasure of Rebecca Conroy on the show. Good morning to you and welcome to you, Rebecca.
Hello, Julian. How lovely of you to invite me on. I'm so
Yes.
looking forward to our conversation.
So am I. I'm looking forward to having you on here today. So you're the CEO and principal of East Sussex College Group, and you've worked in education for over 25 years. And you worked in schools, 4 universities before a career now in the further education. So you have a passion of supporting young people and adults with barriers and challenges to engage and appreciate their unique abilities and contribution. That's why you work in education and why you work where you are now. And we will be exploring value-driven leadership in a moment. But before we get there, I'd just like to ask you, what do you love about what you do, Rebecca?
I love the capacity for FE colleges to change people's lives, and that sounds really grand, but it's true. And I love the fact that on a day-to-day basis, if I wander around the many campuses that we've got at East Sussex College, every day there are people, young people, adults from all walks of life, from all over the world, developing skills, building confidence, and really finding what they want to do in the world in a way that I think is quite unique to this sector. And I love the fact that you can literally walk into rooms around the place and find all sorts going on. There's never a dull moment. And ultimately, I love the purpose of what we do and why we do it. And it's an incredibly difficult sector to leave. I've joined uh, a predecessor college to this, what became merged into East Sussex College 20 years ago, and have struggled to leave and keep coming back to various different FE colleges. And I think it'll probably be the place I remain until I stop doing anything.
It's interesting because I think something what you're passionate about, and it'd be interesting to understand where that's come from, is seeing that sort of potential in people and seeing that sort of,
Mm.
I guess, unlocked. And is what I do as a coach is I thought people come to me with that potential and I help unlock it. And you do it in a very, obviously, very different way as a college, but there's a similar thing. You've got these students, whether they're
Mm.
young people or adults, and they've got this, I guess, potential. And then you're providing various courses or interactions that will ultimately unlock it. So where does that passion come from in terms of being within the education sector and sort of working with where you are now?
Yeah, my both of my parents worked in education. So my mum worked in FE colleges all of her life. Well, I say all of her life. She moved into universities in the latter part of her career, but I suppose when I remember going in with her occasionally, and I remember her doing adult night classes, and just how she spoke about it really hit me. And my dad worked in a school with a sort of sixth form in quite a deprived part of Leicestershire, and he stayed in the same school his whole career and sort of saw generations moving through the school. So it was definitely part of the fabric of my youth, just sort of understanding what they did, what they loved about it. And I think that they were actually keen for me to do something very different. I'd talk about doing a teaching qual, and they said, no, don't do it, go do something else. I think they were desperate for me to go and try some different stuff, which I did early in my career. But ultimately, I think I was just to drawn to big organizations that work with people. I love working with people. Seeing, I love working alongside different teams, but I also love the sort of the impact of what we do. So I think it's definitely in the blood, so to speak.
Mm. And so you're the CEO of this group, and therefore mean you're in a leadership position, and
Mm.
therefore you lead how this organisation goes forward. And leadership is there's a lot to it, and probably a lot to what people realise what goes into it. And you talk about, you've shared with me already that you're more about value driven
Mm.
leadership. And I'd like to get a bit more, I suppose, understanding of what you see as value-driven
Mm.
leadership, and also what underpins those values that you talk about.
Yeah, so I do like to think of myself as a values driven leader, and it's something that I'm really proud of. And for me, the values are around the purpose of what we're doing. So that's a really important part of how I lead. I've worked for a lot of different people with a lot of different leadership styles. And I think the danger is that you become very disconnected. I've worked for people who are quite disconnected with the bread and butter purpose of what a college is here to do. So I really try and stay very focused on what we're trying to do, which is to support our students, give our students the best experience, to give our young people those transforming opportunities, to give adults the opportunities that perhaps they didn't have earlier in their lives, or that are going to really sort of enhance what they do now. And so for me, the purpose is so closely tied into what I do on a daily basis as far as I possibly can, and not losing sight of that. And I think for me, value, we can talk about values. Values can be good. Often it implies they're good. Values could be bad, but if we assume that the values are good ones, then for me it's about trust and integrity, and really just staying true to my personality, and not not playing a role too much. We all play roles, and we all have to play roles when we come to work. But I think
Mm,
trying to step out of that as much as is possible, and just remember I'm working with people, and we're trying to do the best. We're all trying to do the best, and being optimistic about people's, perhaps people's motivations. And a really trusted mentor years ago said to me, if we start by thinking the best of a situation, think the best of what people are doing and why they're
mm,
doing it. Yeah, that can get you a long way. That really, if you just suspend sort of the instinct, possibly, to get annoyed, or feel that somebody's not doing something to deliberately kind of
mm.
do wrong. Actually, most people aren't. So let's start by thinking the best, and aim to move forward optimistically. That I hope that kind of answers that question. But I think values um, are so integral to this organisation,
Mm,
and really help me connect with the other members of staff here, the teams here, most of whom are so dedicated to their students and really ultimately want the best for their students day in, day out. So my service as a leader is to make sure they've got what they need as far as I
mm.
possibly can, and that we do deliver, and that we're really, we stay really focused on that.
It seems like good advice you were given there, almost that suspending judgment with people,
Mm,
isn't it? Not having that sense of coming in with a judgment and actually thinking the best. And there's a lot to be said about setting our intentions
mm,
sometimes. And rather than saying, I'm going to come and do this, actually, my intentions is to help, my intentions is to, see the best in things or see the
mm,
potential. And actually, you see a lot more opportunities. It also changes your language, doesn't it, and how you
mm.
interact. Do you are you quite intentional then in terms of how you approach people who work for you and those people who are stakeholders within the organization?
Yeah, very much so. I think my start point is to listen as well, at least as much as I talk. Ideally, we've got two ears and one mouth. Let's try and get
Mm,
that balance right. And learn and listen to people's concerns, and really, really try and listen to where's it coming from. What is that what is that motivation or fear, or opportunity that they really want to
mm,
share, and try to get to try for communications to be really quite meaningful fairly quickly. And and, and some of that is about, I think, trying to leave egos well clear of the workplace as much as is possible, and not and I guess my language is quite deliberate in not trying, or trying to get the best out of people, and trying not to um, create barriers or create hierarchy when it doesn't need to be there. Sometimes we need to have some clarity, and ultimately I am accountable and responsible for the organisation. I never shy away from that. If I've got to make some tough decisions, I'll make them, but I'll certainly spend the time explaining them, and taking feedback along the way, and learning, and doing all of those things. But ultimately, when I can possibly avoid hierarchy. I do. I think
Mm.
that's I think it helps level and just helps people trust a bit more and feel that they've got that they can talk to me and I'll listen and I'm really responsive. I can't always agree and I can't always follow up and I can't always do everything people want me to do.
Mm.
But if I'm honest about that, I don't think you can do more.
Just exploring a bit more about the tough decisions and
Mm,
the tough calls you have to make, obviously, as the CEO.
mm,
Um, I think sometimes people can perceive, and this is a wrong perception, that value driven leadership is a bit soft, is a
mm,
bit sort of not vague, but just a little bit, oh, everything's all right, and all very, because there's lots of things. They talk about caring, talk about trust, talk about humility, talk about empowering people and all that sort of stuff. How do you play that out? Have you got any examples, of
mm.
not share people, but examples where you have to make a tough call, and how do you
Yeah.
go about that? Because
Mm.
that's quite important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the sector I work in has faced massive challenges around funding cuts, both in terms of real, actual, significant funding cuts, and a lack of investment, and a lack of sort of keeping up with basic kind of just in terms of cost of living rises, all of those things. So the money side of things, the financial challenges are real and are ever present and need really careful managing. This college 2 years ago was financially inadequate in terms of its financial health. That put it into an intervention phase with the Department of Education, and I was appointed as chief exec just around that point, about a few months after we went into intervention. So I've had to make some really tough decisions around how we invest, how we basically balance our books, whether how we reduce our costs, and sometimes that involves redundancies. I've had significant numbers of rounds of redundancies in probably in the last 10 years in particular, and they are always really challenging, really difficult, and really, again, that's where values comes to the forefront again, because that these decisions have to be made. We have to explain them. We have to be clear on what we can and can't afford, and we have to be honest with people. So you do need the values and the integrity, but ultimately, if we have to make the savings, we have to make the savings. There is no choice. For the security and safety of the whole organisation, I have to make these decisions and have to, and they are tough ones. So I don't shy away from it, but I know where it's coming from. I know why I'm making them, and I am
Mm.
more than prepared to explain and engage and talk and do these things and do things properly, so that people have time to absorb and acknowledge and be part of the journey. They may not like it, but at least they'll know that they've been given that information and that courtesy and that respect. Um, and another side, I suppose, one of the other elements I've learnt in terms of making difficult decisions is that sometimes you can assume, and quite often it is the case, that these are difficult things for people, and people don't want to face redundancy. Of course, that is my start point. People don't want to face
Mm.
redundancy. However, what I've learned over the years as well is that for some people, actually, if you open up choices for people and you do, possibly one element of this sort of decision making is to say, okay, how can we avoid this being compulsory? How can we enable people who might want to move
Mm.
on and make the savings in a much more positive way?
Mm.
And often, if you start by trying to solve a problem with integrity and to do least harm, you can open up all sorts of options, and people may then have a change of lifestyle, or oh, actually, now you've suggested that, yeah, okay, let's have a think about
Mm.
what I might want to do. And so I think yeah, the sort of the broader approach, yes, make the tough decisions, do it properly, do it with respect, but do it creatively as well, because you could
Mm.
open up all sorts of opportunities for people that you may not have considered, or they may not have considered. So yeah, I think, and I absolutely take the point that values driven leadership probably has a reputation for being a bit soft. I don't shy away from not. I don't really have a problem if people think I'm soft. I know I'm not, and that's fine.
Mm.
But equally, I think there is a sort of well, there can be a tendency in leadership to need to play a role. And my view is, no, I'm going to be authentic, and
mm,
and be honest, but I'm pretty resilient underneath it, and
mm,
I have had to, I've had to do things that are pretty unpleasant, and I don't love it, but I'll do it. And I think
mm,
something around, just staying true and knowing that in the end, whatever I've had to do, I've done it in the best way possible, as well as I possibly can, and that's
mm.
so important.
And I like that approach, even when you were, making people redundant.
Mm,
Unfortunately, that you had that almost mindset of almost there's for them. There's some silver linings that could come out
mm,
of this. There's some
mm,
opportunities. It could shift somebody. It could get some people out of their funk.
yeah.
Which is in itself is how you're embracing that.
Mm,
When you do make those tough decisions, do you go through like a process in how you think, how you go about it? Is there a not a formula as such, but how do you just talk me through what you go through? And
mm.
it'd just be interesting to people to understand how, from your perspective, value driven, what was the things you consider when you're making those tough decisions?
Yeah. So I think so in terms of what you have to do, I think there is you need to really take some time and speak to trusted colleagues and really understand. So if we need to make a saving, let's look at the organization and understand where those opportunities might be that cause least harm and may enable us to make savings by potentially not replacing a vacancy. So that's a fairly straightforward one. um, I think in terms of really thinking through the purpose of the organisation, if our purpose is to support students, then we need to protect those services and those resources that are directly going to impact on the students' lives. So if we then have those principles really clearly in our mind, that's, some of these areas are sacrosanct. We cannot make savings in this particular area, but we may need to think about this or this or this. And it may be that we
Mm,
need to start to think about having a smaller service, a back office service, for example. So once we've sort of identified, and again, through being purposeful and values driven around what we do and how we do it and how we can find those opportunities to
mm,
save, I think then it's about, so we've established the what, then it's about the how. How do we take people through a redundancy process in the most dignified and respectful way,
mm,
through clear communication, through open channels to take genuine feedback when we're consulting? How do we make sure that union colleagues support staff as well? How do we open up opportunities as a large organisation that is a learning organisation? We offer training. I've had situations where we might then have discussions with people who are looking to take redundancy, but we then enabled them to start to look at a retraining programme through
mm,
our college or through funding them through somewhere else, to enable them to build the skills to take forward
mm,
perhaps a dream they might not have ever thought they'd be able to
mm,
take. But again, that comes through listening and taking time and treating people
mm,
as individuals and understanding the impact that this may be having on them. So yeah, ultimately working and treating people with kindness
mm,
whilst having to do something that is difficult. That that's how I think it is it's taking the time and knowing at the end of it, if I can look myself in the mirror and eyeball myself and say, we've
mm,
done that in the fairest, kindest way we could have done, and
mm,
we've really listened to people, and we have resolved this in the most positive way that we could have done.
mm,
It doesn't mean that there won't be people that we've had to let go that don't want to be let go, but we've done it in the most respectful way,
mm.
and we've avoided as much of that as we possibly can have done.
And it takes, as you say, it takes time because you're
Mm,
you're engaging with people, you're listening to people, you're trying to get an understanding of the situation, rather than coming with an edict of this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do
mm,
it, which is one style of leadership. Actually, this is more engaging, collaborative,
mm,
and also I think by through that process you get different perspectives. You might not change the outcome, so to speak,
mm,
but it might change the how, as you say, and how you go about it, and the opportunities that come from that.
mm.
Now, you carry on. Were you going to say something there?
Well, I was going to say, I think one of the measures, and it's happened a few times, it doesn't always happen, but I think when I've had those final goodbyes with people, to know that we've still maintained a really positive relationship, that they perhaps, thank the organisation for treating them with such respect, that they've now got a
mm,
new pathway, that they haven't their relationship with the organisation hasn't broken. They've not been left with grief and sort of anger and all of those things that make any difficult situation 10 times worse.
mm,
Yes, it's taken a bit more time than perhaps it might have done. Yeah, we've invested a bit more energy. Great. That's really positive for us and for them. And
mm,
often it's such a small world. Often you end up working with people either in another organization, or they come back to work for you in a different way in a few years' time. So I think just having that sense of maintaining relationships as positive, that's a really important thing for me,
mm,
and has has served me over the last 10 years, particularly, just in the sense of understanding that things can be done differently, and
mm,
there's a massively positive benefit to putting that time and energy into it.
mm. Now, that's obviously your style of leadership is value driven, and that's
Mm,
how you work, that's how you operate, that's your mindset. How do you then bring that to an organization? We just talked some examples how you lead, but how do you create a culture? Because obviously, part of your role is setting the tone of the
mm,
culture, the direction of
mm.
the culture. How do you bring that culture of value driven into your organization? Has that been difficult? Has that been easy? And what are your sort of ways of doing that?
So I think my style is really clear, and I ask questions a lot, and I'm my, I'm always thinking, how will people receive this? If it's a piece of news, or it's a written communication, or it's a policy, actually that the style in which we communicate, the approach, the tone, every bit of it adds to the culture. So my team, once they kind of get to know me, will understand how I like things to be phrased. I I go back to transactional analysis a lot. The sense of having three states of child, parent, and adult, and I'm always seeking to move us into adult to adult communication as
Mm,
far as is possible, even with young people. That's, if you can shift away from parent child, you'll get things are much more open and neutral and productive, in my view. So I'll often talk about that when we're communicating. And leadership can be very parental, and again, it's trying to shift people away from being either angry parents or controlling parents into being more respectful adults who treat people as
mm,
adults rather than children. So that's quite a powerful tool. And I'll often ask people, how would you take that? How would you feel about that if you were receiving that piece of news? How would that make you feel?
mm,
How would that decision make you feel? Would it make you feel trusted? Would it make you feel annoyed? Because I know that would make me feel annoyed, and I'll often say something like that. So I think
mm,
just putting myself into the receiver's shoes is a really powerful tool. But it's I think it's constant. I constantly think about how we phrase things, how we do things. So it's not a sort of, oh, I'm going to switch into values driven leadership from 10:30 to 11 on a Thursday morning.
mm,
It'll be, no, this is what we do, and we live and breathe it, and it's quite infectious. And I've worked for people. I mean, I've learned so much from people along the way in
mm,
terms of, that's really powerful, right? They've really thought about how they've phrased that, or
mm,
they've by listening to somebody say something in a particular way, I'm really bought into that. I get it. I really, yeah, I'm right with them. Uh, and the alternative is you're switched off, you've probably got a knot in your stomach, and you probably want to get away from that message or that person as quickly as you can. So if
mm.
so again, I've sort of learned from how I felt about things, and really try and stay true to that feeling as often as I can.
You make a valid point there. It's not about turning up at whatever 9 o'clock and then
Mm,
I switch on. I'm now the leader of this organization and I have to do this and this. It's who you are, and I think
mm,
we often forget the power of role modeling and
mm,
how impactful that is. It's actually more powerful than whatever you say, in terms of what people observe, and making sure it aligns, what you're saying, what you're doing is aligning to that. Because if there isn't, there's a sort of almost a cognitive dissonance.
Mm.
People subconsciously, they don't, not always aware of it, but they sense something's not quite right.
Yeah.
And we learn by role modeling as well. And so you perceiving and you doing what you're doing, the tough decisions, leading in a value-driven way, will actually affect the culture, because people will observe it and see what Rebecca does and how she does it, and they like what you do, and therefore it has a multiple impact, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think I do think about that a lot, and I think that's again important when I've watched leaders be themselves, and often it is about taking the time as they're going about the organisation, talking to people, listening, chatting, being friendly, being positive. That's that's something I love doing, so I don't find it difficult at all. In fact, I wish I could do more of it, but it is. Yeah, I think that's a really important point. It's living and breathing how you are, how you want to behave, how you want to be seen, and not just saying it and not paying lip service to it. And we've all met people who that where there is that dissonance, and it makes you question, and it breaks your trust with them, I think, even if you don't quite absorb it or acknowledge it. If you see people being rude to or not even rude, but dismissive to perhaps, I don't know, waiting staff in a restaurant, it can really put you off people. And it is that sense of I respect everybody, and I want to make sure that's, again, going back to my sort of looking myself in the eye in the mirror, am I, am I being respectful to everybody I meet? Yeah, I hope I am. That's a really important thing for me. I hope it comes naturally, but and I think that then comes through, and I hope does influence other people in the organisation.
I'm sure it does, because value driven is all about honesty, integrity, courage, trust, care, and you got to be doing it. As simple as that. It's obvious in some ways, but sometimes very difficult to work that out. It sounds great in how you lead, Rebecca, and I think your organisations are very sort of good that they have you in terms of how you approach things and tackle things. If people are interested in getting to know a bit more about you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Oh, what a question! I'm a little bit of a luddite on all these different, and I shouldn't be, because I'm not that old. I need to dust down my LinkedIn profile, Julian. So I will do that, and I'd love to connect with people. And I am really interested in connecting with other people who share the values that I share in terms of their style of leadership. And the more I think people recognise that this is an important way of leading, the better, and not being afraid of it. And I think particularly for young women, there is a people perhaps are afraid of behaving in the way that they might see as being weak or soft. And I'd love to connect with people, I suppose, share my kind of experiences of bucking that, and doing it with great sort of determination and deliberation around style. So yeah, I think if I make a promise that I will sort myself out in terms of LinkedIn, I would love to connect with people.
Well, thank you for your time today, Rebecca. It's been really inspirational and really insightful. It's been great to get to know you more, but also understand how you lead.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you, Julie. It's been a real pleasure. I've so enjoyed it.